Greetings from TV AIBD. Hi, this is Philomena Pragasan, and you're with me on Connect with AIBD. And today I'm talking to a very prominent lady, especially in the area of digital inclusivity. She's none other than Ms Doreen Bogdan-Martin, Director of the ITU's Telecommunication Development Bureau. And actually, she's the first woman to be elected as the director of this very important position. She took office on the 1st of January, 2019. And Doreen, you've made history when you took that position in 2019. Congratulations and welcome to TV AIBD. How are you today, Doreen?
I'm great, thank you. Very happy to be here.
It's wonderful to have you as well. And there's so much that you've done, for the ITU and for people out there. And one of the things that I want to bring is the pandemic. When the pandemic struck, all of us were just like, oh my God, it's work from home, schools closed, right? People were working, many people were losing their jobs, and connectivity and digital inclusivity was the only keyword during that period. So what were some of the efforts of the ITU when the pandemic began?
We focused on, I would say, two things. The first was keeping connectivity, keeping everyone connected, that was connected, I should say. And of course, the network didn't crash. I think we have to remember that. There were huge traffic surges. Everyone, as you said, went online. So we worked with our governments, with the regulators, with the operators to make sure that the connectivity stayed on and we could get to as many people as possible. But at the same time, I think we have to remember that half the world is not connected. And so while we were all challenged with working online, schooling online, there were half the population not connected. And that's also where we tried to focus. So focusing on the 1.6 billion children that had their education disrupted. We also focused on safety, child online safety, because we had many young people that were coming online for the first time. Mm-hmm. We wanted to make sure that they were safe. So those are just some of the examples of the spaces that we focused on.
Fantastic, because I think the child online protection, for instance, was something that ITU came out with very quickly, because I think the children were so vulnerable, wouldn't you say, that when they started going online and instead of being safe, there was so much of problems that actually cropped up. And I really thought that COP was something that was totally brilliant, right? How has this impacted children now? Has it helped? For instance, this child online protection?
I think it has helped. We have been, I would say, absolutely thrilled that so many governments, so many companies have embraced the guidelines. Many countries have decided to translate those guidelines in local languages. We developed a little mascot, Sango, so that I think that also had a nice appeal, especially for the young audiences. And I do think it has made a difference. But this is something that needs to be continuous. It's not a sort of one-off. We need to keep it going.
And I think that's really interesting where children are concerned, to make sure that the cybersecurity and child online protection guidelines are so essential. Now, while we're still on the topic of children, ITU has also come up with GIGA. Now, GIGA is so exciting because there you go, you're actually, I like the word GIGA because so much to do with digital stuff. So, and it's so catchy, and it's really working in many, many places. How does GIGA work, Doreen?
So it's a partnership with UNICEF, and it's about connecting every school on the planet to the internet and every young person to information, opportunity, and choice. It's bold, it's ambitious. This is a huge undertaking, but it's also something that world leaders actually agreed to back at the World Summit on the Information Society back in the day. So we have put the spotlight on this issue and constructed this incredible partnership that I think is very innovative, very creative. We focus on mapping. So the first pillar is to map all the world's schools to understand which schools are connected. Then we look at the second pillar, which is the connectivity pillar. So how are we going to connect those schools, in particular, the schools that might be that sort of last mile, most difficult, no electricity, other factors. Then, of course, we look at the financing piece. That's the big challenge. We have some innovative financing models that we're exploring, including a connectivity bond, which is super exciting. And then, of course, the last part, which perhaps is the most important part, is that empowerment part. So what happens when you get the schools and the communities connected? And then how can that connectivity be used to actually empower these students and these communities? We have 19 countries so far on board. We have mapped 1 million schools, and we have lots of exciting things planned for this year and beyond.
Now let's come back to dealing with the connecting the unconnected. Now, I don't think it's such an easy task, because even if you're talking about school children or the digital divide that exists, I think many children, many people are still unconnected. So what are some of ITU's efforts, perhaps, Doreen, towards this direction with the governments themselves?
On our side, we've come up with, I think, a number of exciting different toolkits that we worked on in collaboration with many other partners. We have a digital regulation toolkit that we did with the World Bank and others. We have a really exciting toolkit that's called our Last Mile Connectivity Solutions Guide. It's a sort of diagnostic that you can use to understand the best technology solutions depending upon geography, electricity, and other factors. So there's a lot of exciting tools, I think, that we've come up with that can be used by communities and by countries to get to those unconnected.
I think those are really interesting tools that you were talking about. If one looks at the kind of new strategies or new ideas that the ITU has come up with, connectivity and digital inclusivity is being taken very seriously. So I see that the road is uphill, but nevertheless, people are getting there with, especially during this pandemic. I think ITU has been really aggressive. So I've seen this is really exciting, because people did not talk so much about connectivity before this. But after during the pandemic, or when the pandemic began, that's when everyone is rushing and speaking about that one word, connectivity, and the importance of being connected. Doreen?
I completely agree. COVID has put the spotlight on connectivity. I think there's no government in the world that would not have connectivity at the top of its agenda. Now it's perceived as critical, vital. It's this vital digital lifeline that everyone needs to have. And so I think from that perspective, it has made the mandate and the mission of the ITU more important now, I would say, than ever, because the urgency is there. And I think it's not going to go away after COVID. So we need to find ways to leverage the international community, to leverage our relationships with our partners, and to really forge forward concrete action plans that can help us to connect the unconnected.
But let's look at how things are moving, like for instance, for ITU next year, you mentioned a while ago, things may not go back to 100% perfect as it was, but we are going to get ready and gear towards that. So what are some of your strategies perhaps that you have in mind to face this, living in the new norm? Doreen?
Yeah, I mean, of course, digital is the key part of the new norm. And I think no one would deny that. So it does, as I said, it does make the importance of our mandate, never more important. And we really need to be focused on connecting the unconnected. So finding ways to do that in a sort of semi-lockdown restricted world, we have to be creative. So we have to employ local sort of solutions, local talent, if we can actually get out to the countries that need us most. We need to use the virtual tools at our disposal. We're fortunate that we have many options to draw from. And of course, we need to find, I think, as an organization, new ways to kind of mix this sort of physical presence in the office with remote working and how to make the best use of that. But I think in terms of next year and beyond, it is a critical moment for the ITU. We actually have 3 world conferences next year. We have the World Telecommunications Standardization Assembly, which of course is another important world conference taking place in March. We have my development conference taking place in June. And then of course we have the Plenipotentiary Conference taking place in September that will adopt the strategic plan for the union as a whole for the next 4-year period.
Empowering broadcasters worldwide. Connect with TV AIBD now, connecting the world.
I want to go back to connectivity, and also you're talking about women, because ITU leaves no one behind, and the women are also one of the key areas, gender equality, right, in the digital age. And you've come up with Equals, which I think is a very innovative and very exciting program for women. How does this work, Doreen?
So Equals, I'm quite excited about Equals. It's over 100 partners, so I think it's a great example of partnerships. It was constructed with the understanding that, again, no one could do this alone, but also that the digital gender gap is complicated in that there's no sort of one quick fix. So we have a digital access gap when it comes to women and girls. So they are less likely to have access to the internet, less likely to have access to a mobile phone. So there's that access divide. There's also the digital skills divide. So women and girls are less likely to have the digital skills necessary to actually take advantage of connectivity if they have access to it. And then, of course, the third piece, which I find even more complicated, is the women in technology piece. And that is linked, as you know, to the lack of girls taking up studies in STEM. Those that do enter the tech force, some of them, they often leave a few years after they enter the workforce. We have this leaky pipeline problem. And so we're not able to get a sufficient number of women through the ranks to actually take up leadership positions. So when we look, for example, women ministers, we have 193 member states. Only 13% of the ministers are women. Mm-hmm. When we look at the technology sector, the private sector, the numbers aren't much better. And I think the workforce as a whole, in Europe, maybe it's about 30%. In the rest of the world, it's about 20% or below. Mm-hmm. And I think it's problematic when you think about the development of applications, the development about equipment. If you don't have women at the table, where are we going with that? And it's even, of course, more concerning when you think about artificial intelligence and algorithms and machine learning. You need to have inclusive, diverse teams.
Absolutely. And I think that one of the greatest initiatives that has been undertaken by the ITU is Girls in ICT. One other thing that I really like is the inclusion of youth. I'm seeing more and more young people being involved. I'm not just talking about girls or young women, but I'm talking about youth in general. And that is something that's coming up in the ITU. You have a lot of young people who are now coming in and saying their piece. Now, this is really great. So what is the main idea of having this young people coming in, Doreen?
Well, I think we have to keep in mind the increasing youth demographic. It's a space that we cannot ignore. And so we've created this Generation Connect initiative. We've set up a board of young people. We've set up 6 Generation Connect youth groups. And it's really all about engaging, empowering, and of course, the participation elements. We want to change the way that we engage youth in the ITU. We don't want that we develop things and then we give it to youth. We want that youth are at the table, that they're part of the development, that they have a voice at the table, and that they can really help shape our digital future. They are the future. And I really think the UN Secretary General recognized this when he launched his common agenda. You know, youth is that missing piece for development and for peace as well. And so we have to include them in a constructive way. We're excited because I mentioned the World Telecommunications Development Conference next year. It will be preceded by a global youth summit, the Generation Connect Youth Summit. And so we're looking forward to the outcome of that summit in the form of a declaration that will then be part of the World Telecommunications Development Conference.
Absolutely. And I think this is so important because everything that connects or that spells connectivity or digitization is to do with young people. They are the most hands-on, and it's good to see that so many young people are so active in many of your webinars and conferences that you hold, Doreen. So we're looking forward to Generation Connect, right? And I want to say, congratulations to you because you've taken office just 1 year before the pandemic. No one was ready for that, right? So those strategies, everything that you had, 2020 was such a different year. So what are some of the milestones you accomplished in 2020?
Yeah. I think, nothing would have really prepared us for the pandemic. And so much of what we had to do was to sort of adapt, be flexible. I think another important thing was to recognize that staff were struggling, especially staff that were alone. And I think it was important to ensure that sort of team spirit. So we reinforced, we have regular town hall meetings, but we adopted these coffee chats where I met with all the different teams. They brought their children, they brought their animals. And it was important that we stayed in touch with each other, that we helped each other. And I think through that process, we kept the team motivated, we kept the team focused, and we were able to continue to deliver. I think in terms of our success and our operational plan last year, I think we exceeded what we had intended to do. And of course, we had to be creative. We had to have virtual bilaterals. We had to have virtual technical assistance support. We had to move all of our trainings to virtual, but it worked. Would I like this to continue forever? No. I think that human face-to-face interaction is so important in the work that we do. But I think we've been fortunate that last year and this year as well, that we have been able to continue to support our members, even using digital means, without being on the ground. And I think we will continue to do that and hopefully soon be able to get back on the ground.
Absolutely. And I think that the virtual, we've all been looking at each other on screen. I'm waiting to see how you look like in person and talk to you. It's, and sometimes, as a leader, one of the biggest challenges is keeping everyone motivated. Okay, I just want to come back to this question. I saw that you are a qualified amateur radio operator, and I'm a media lady. So I have to ask you this. This is an interesting passion. Are you still into it?
So actually, I must confess, I was inspired by my children in that space, and also by my father, who was he was a medical doctor, but he was also an amateur radio person. And so we had the whole setup at home, and I watched him as a child with his hobby. But my children had the opportunity to speak to the astronauts on the space station.
Wow.
They went through a competition at their school, and fortunately they were selected, and they all came to the ITU, to the amateur radio room, where they each got to ask a question to the astronauts. And they were so excited. I mean, it was amazing for me as a mom to see how how incredible that experience was for them, and I think also life-changing for them. And so I made them a promise, because the way that they spoke to the astronauts was using the amateur station at the ITU. And so I kind of made them a promise that I would try to become an amateur radio operator.
It's really exciting. And, I come from the media, and I do know that ITU is also doing quite a lot for the media, for traditional media, with the many, many interesting programs, Doreen, because one of the things that the pandemic has taught us is the area that traditional media can come in, especially in this pandemic, where there was so much of disinformation and infodemic. Traditional media actually showed the way as well. So I'm glad that the ITU has such a broad spectrum of so many areas that you work in. And so there you go. You're a mom, you are a director of the Telecommunications Development Bureau, and then you are also the first woman. How do you empower other women? Is it only through the programs, or do you give a lot of talks, Doreen?
Well, I give a lot of talks, yes, definitely. And there are a few women that I mentor myself, because I think that coaching, mentoring piece is really important. And I also try to put the spotlight on other women. So it's not just about me, it's about other women. And there's so many great women in our space, like yourself, that we need to kind of showcase, and we need to encourage to step up and speak at our events and really help pave the way for others to follow.
Thank you, Doreen. It's really been interesting talking to you, so much of passion and so many new ideas that you have come up with. Actually, the pandemic has also proven to be an opportunity for many people to get creative and think of things we never thought about. And I think for the ITU, for you as the director, these are the things that you've come up with, which is really helping society out there, from digital safety for children to inclusivity of women, as well as children in schools, getting them connected. And I'm sure you have things like community networks that you're also working with. I really want to congratulate you, and I want to say thank you for this awesome interview, Doreen Bogdan. Any last words before we say goodbye?
Well, thank you so much, Philomena. Thank you for the opportunity. It's been a great chat, and look forward to more in the future. Thank you.